Okay, so everyone told me Iran was going to shut down one of the most important waterways on Earth the second the US started bombing them. 6 days of airstrikes later, they didn't touch it. Instead, they did something way weirder. And once you understand why, you're going to look at this whole war differently. Hey guys, welcome back. So there's a story that's been sitting under the radar for the last week, and I think it deserves way more attention than it's getting because it's not really about oil or ships, or even Iran specifically. It's about a decision, one very deliberate decision, that tells us who's actually in charge of Iran right now, and how they plan to fight this war. Here's the setup. For 6 days straight, the United States has been carrying out airstrikes inside Iran. Military command centers, missile facilities, oil infrastructure, a real sustained campaign. And for years, every single analyst, every wargamer, every intelligence briefing has said the same thing. If you push Iran into a corner, Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. That's the one waterway that roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes through every day. Japan needs it. South Korea needs it. India needs it. China needs it more than anyone. So when the bombing started, everyone braced for that moment. It never came. Instead, a few days ago, Iran fired on 2 tankers, not in the strait itself, but in Omani waters nearby. 2 ships. Not the whole channel. The Revolutionary Guard basically said these tankers were fair targets, calling them rogue vessels. And I want you to actually sit with that because on paper it looks small. It looks almost like a non-event compared to Iran being able to shut down a fifth of the world's oil supply. But I'd argue this tiny, contained strike tells us more about where this war is headed than a full closure ever could. Because here's the thing nobody's saying out loud. Iran absolutely could have gone bigger. They've got coastal missile batteries. They've got the ability to lay sea mines overnight. Fast boats, drones, all of it. Capability was never the issue. This was a choice. And when someone with the power to escalate massively chooses not to, that's not weakness, that's a message. So the real question isn't why didn't Iran close the strait? It's what is Iran trying to tell us by not doing it? Let's think about this practically for a second. You don't actually need to block an entire waterway to scare the world's shipping industry. You just need to make people afraid to use it. The moment 2 tankers get hit, insurance premiums for every ship in that region spike. Shipping companies start rerouting. Some demand naval escorts. Some just wait it out. Oil prices move, not because oil stopped flowing, but because fear entered the market. With 2 missiles, Iran just proved it can rattle the global economy without ever fully shutting the door. That's not a sledgehammer. That's a scalpel. And a scalpel is reusable. A full blockade is a one-time card. Once you play it, it's gone, and you've united literally the entire world against you. Which brings up something really important that I think gets missed constantly in this conversation. China. China buys the vast majority of Iran's oil exports. China is basically the country keeping Iran's economy alive through decades of sanctions. But China's own economy also depends on oil flowing through that same strait. So if Iran ever fully closed Hormuz, they wouldn't just be hurting the US, or Japan, or Europe, they'd be choking their own biggest ally. That's a line Iran cannot afford to cross, no matter how bad this war gets. And notice which tankers got hit, UAE ships. Not Chinese-bound cargo. That's not a coincidence. That's precision. So, who is this message actually for? I'd break it into 3 audiences. To the Gulf states hosting American military operations, the message is basically, your American partners can't protect every ship you own, and you're going to feel that. To Washington, it's, I can make this expensive for your regional allies without giving you the excuse to escalate into full-scale war. And to Beijing, it's arguably the most interesting one. Look how careful I'm being with the resource that keeps your economy running, even while I'm the one being bombed. That third message might matter more than people realize, because it's basically Iran auditioning for a permanent seat at the table with China and Russia, proving it's a disciplined, reliable partner rather than a reckless one. And there's something else worth noticing here. Iran's new leadership has barely said anything publicly since taking over in the middle of all this. A lot of people are reading that silence as confusion or weakness. I actually think it's the opposite. When you don't give speeches, you can't be quoted, you can't box yourself in with red lines you might have to walk back. You let your actions speak instead. And this week, the actions spoke pretty clearly. There's one more piece that fits this pattern almost perfectly. Around the same time as the tanker strike, an American who had been detained was released by Iran as what was described as a goodwill gesture. Two things happening at once that look contradictory: striking tankers with one hand, releasing a prisoner with the other. But they're not contradictory at all. That's a leader controlling the temperature of a conflict on purpose. Pressure in one hand, an open door in the other. Here's the part one think is genuinely underrated. A dramatic move, like fully closing Hormuz, would be easier for the West to deal with in a strange way. It would unite the whole world against Iran, give the US a clear justification for overwhelming force, and rally the Gulf states solidly behind Washington. But calibrated, controlled pressure like this does the opposite. It keeps China comfortable. It keeps the Gulf states nervous, but not necessarily unified with the US. It drags things out. It slowly wears down the perception that the US has the situation fully under control, without ever crossing a line dramatic enough to justify a bigger response. In other words, a reckless opponent is actually the easier one to beat. A patient, calculating one that plays a long game and slowly builds itself into an indispensable partner for the world's rising powers, that's a much harder problem. And I'm not sure the conversation in the West has fully caught up to which version of Iran we're actually dealing with right now. So here's what I'd be paying attention to over the next couple weeks if you want to actually track where this goes instead of just reacting to headlines. First, do the tanker incidents stay small and spaced out, or do they start escalating? If it stays controlled, that confirms this is a long, deliberate pressure campaign, not a prelude to full-blown conflict. Second, watch the Gulf states, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Iran targeted UAE-linked ships specifically. If those countries start quietly pushing Washington to de-escalate, that tells you the pressure strategy is actually working. Third, watch for more quiet diplomatic gestures, like that prisoner release. Because if the strikes and the goodwill gestures really are two dials on the same control panel, then the actual story isn't the bombing itself. It's whatever negotiation is happening underneath it. Honestly, I think the biggest lesson here is one that applies way beyond this specific war. We tend to associate power with volume, the loudest threat, the biggest explosion, the most dramatic headline. But the people who actually reshape situations long-term are usually the ones playing the quiet, disciplined game. Iran had a nuclear-level economic weapon sitting right there and chose the scalpel instead. That tells you everything about how this new leadership thinks in years, not days. So next time you see a headline that says Iran struck 2 tankers, I'd encourage you not to read that as a small story. Read it as an introduction. This is a new leader telling the world exactly who he is, just not with words. If this actually helped connect some dots for you, hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me where you think this goes next. Does the pressure stay contained, or does it eventually force a bigger move? I read all of them. See you in the next one.